Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The European Union has called for emergency talks to address the rapidly growing number of people fleeing to Europe to escape violence and unrest in Syria, in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iraq, sub-Saharan Africa, and other regions. According to the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, approximately 2,500 people are believed to have died or gone missing trying to reach Europe so far this year. On Sunday, 37 people died when a boat capsized off the Libyan coast. This came just days after another boat capsized off the Libyan coast, killing more than 200 people. Meanwhile, investigators in Hungary and Austrian authorities are continuing to probe the deaths of 71 people who were found abandoned last week inside a truck on the main highway between Budapest and Vienna. On Friday, UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon called on governments to take action on the migrant crisis in Europe.
I'm horrified and heartbroken as refugees and migrants are losing their lives in the Mediterranean, Europe, and beyond. We have seen countless tragedies, most recently the grim discovery of more than 70 people who suffocated inside a truck in Austria. So many people have also drowned in the Mediterranean and also the Andaman Seas. We must understand why people are risking their lives. They are fleeing war, political instability, and insecurity to seek a better future.
Hungary has responded to the situation by building a 109-mile-long razor wire fence on its southern border. Meanwhile, the Washington Post reports scenes of blatant racial profiling at Budapest's main train station. Authorities allowed white and lighter-skinned people to pass through, but stopped and demanded papers from virtually all darker-skinned people. On Saturday alone, Hungary detained 3,000 people. Over the weekend, French Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius accused Hungary of adopting a, quote, scandalous policy toward refugees. He made the remarks during an interview.
With regard to all those people who are politically chased out of their country and who are in war-torn countries, we have to be able to welcome them. It's called the plea for asylum, and every country has to respond to that. France, Germany, others. But when I see certain European countries that do not accept these groups, I find that scandalous.
Which countries are you speaking about?
Particularly countries that are situated in Eastern Europe.
Hungary, for example. What do you think of what's going on there?
They are extremely harsh. Hungary is part of Europe, which has values, and we do not respect those values by putting up fences.
To talk more about the crisis, we're joined by Joel Millman in Geneva, spokesman for the International Organization for Migration there. And here in New York, Ken Roth is with us, Executive Director of Human Rights Watch. We welcome you both to Democracy Now! We also hope to go to the coast of Sicily, where migrants are pouring into the coastal towns. But we're going to start right now in Geneva. Joel Millman, talk about the extent of the crisis. I think it's one that people in the United States are not very well aware of.
Well, we're up to 322,000 seaborne crossings into Europe, principally from Turkey into Greece and from Libya into Italy. This is with 4 months to go in this year, 2015. We're already ahead of where we were last year at the end of August. I'm sorry, where we were for the whole year, 219,000. So we're 100,000 above that, and with another third of the year to go. These are people that are fleeing principally a handful of countries. Syria is number one, Eritrea, Somalia, now Afghanistan has become very prominent as well. All people that generally from those places would merit consideration for asylum and resettlement. So the tragedy is that people that would be treated as refugees by Europe under almost any circumstance are risking their lives for the opportunity to petition for something that most countries in the world think they already deserve.
Talk about the what is fueling this mass migration from Africa, from the Middle East, from around all of the surrounding countries around Europe.
Well, we can't be naive. I mean, what's fueling it is the conflict and the distress that's happening in a few societies. However, it's the lawlessness of places like Syria and Libya right now that deny Europe and the rest of the world any kind of government partner that they can access to try to control or manage this migration flow. We understand that there are demographic imperatives involved, that Europe has a falling birth rate, there's a huge demand for cheap labor, skilled and unskilled, and there's a huge dearth of jobs in the countries where these individuals are coming from. But the fact is, this is not a new condition. This has gone on for decades and had been managed with governments that aren't altogether savory to us, like Gaddafi's government in Libya. However, in the absence of real authority, criminal gangs have stepped up and opportunistically decided to start trafficking in migrants. Quite a number of these cases are people that may not have intended to go to Europe at all in the first place, that have been kidnapped and coerced and stuffed onto boats. So we've seen that to a great degree, particularly in Tripoli and the western part of Libya. But obviously, it's the inability of any government to control this effectively that's created the opportunity for lots of criminal gangs. And they're moving, while the profits are high, they're moving as many people as they can.
Can you explain what the Schengen Agreement is?
Well, it's an agreement that is among European countries, not solely those of the European Union, to be able to transit freely throughout the continent. It's to facilitate tourism and trade, and it's worked quite well for many decades, principally because Europeans are very affluent and they follow rules very well. And until recently, there wasn't quite a lot of people coming sort of irregularly, is the term we like to use, from outside Europe. Unfortunately, this is not a system built to make for orderly transit through Europe when people that aren't there with documents or aren't there with valid visas start coming in these numbers, and the numbers are huge, as we discussed.
Thousands of migrants have sought shelter in a makeshift shantytown in the coastal town of Calais. This is an Afghan refugee named Wahib. Describe his experience there on the eve of a visit from European officials and French ministers.
Nobody's treating us like as a human being here, everybody in police, or if you go to city, somewhere police see us, hey, go jungle, like we are human beings, so they call us jungle. You can see that, So it's very embarrassing for me, actually. I cannot say about other people, but for me it's very embarrassing. It's just because that our country is not good. We cannot stay there. There's a war.
Joel Millman, if you could respond to what this migrant is saying. Joel Millman speaking to us by video stream from Geneva, spokesperson for the International Organization for Migration.
Well, it's tragic, obviously. The individual that was just quoted, just interviewed, he's an English speaker. It's not perfect English, but obviously he's educated. Obviously he's made it all the way from Afghanistan to Calais. These are people that show tremendous resolve. Sometimes they have resources, and often they have great education. They would be able to thrive and integrate well in any society, particularly in Europe or North America. And yet, regulations and rules against transit are keeping them in countries where their lives are often at risk. And we are no longer seeing these people as members of our society and welcome. We're seeing them as threats, especially if they come from Muslim countries. And it's true. They're reduced to living in squalor, which we think is beneath the dignity of any human being, much less a migrant.
What are you calling on the European Union to do right now, Joel Millman?
Well, mostly to be flexible. We don't lobby particularly. We're not an advocacy group, and we don't think it's proper to single Europe out, as many have, as not doing its share. Europe has taken on a tremendous burden and done so, even though it's a system that's shared by 28 countries in the EU, and then, of course, all the other countries not in the EU. They're trying to find their way to turn what had been a uniform policy into something more flexible. And I think they've made pretty good strides. Germany last week talked about shelving the Dublin rule, which insists that an asylum seeker only accept asylum from the first country he arrives in, which clearly isn't working. Hundreds of thousands have crossed into Italy in the last 2 years, and very few of them stay there. They all want to go to Northern Europe or Germany or UK. So this is the kind of flexibility that we'd like to see more of. Obviously, we want more resettlement quotas. We want people in Europe to understand that it's not a zero-sum game between letting them drown on the one hand or giving them asylum and access to every benefit in the society on the other. There are many, many solutions in between. There's temporary protected status, there's humanitarian resettlement. There's all kinds of things that governments have done for decades that only require a little bit of clear thinking and a political will. Here at IOM, we often reflect that it was 40 years ago this summer that the world was faced with the so-called boat people crisis in Southeast Asia. And the speed and the diligence with which countries as far afield as Canada, the U.S., France, Australia, Thailand, and others all pitched in and found solutions for millions of people over a very short period of time and resettled them successfully is something to be inspired by. And, you often feel like what's happened in the world, they used to have solutions for these kind of crises, and now they seem to only have excuses for why they can't act. We know we can do better, and we know that we will with time.
Joel Millman, I want to thank you for being with us, spokesperson for the International Organization for Migration, speaking to us by video stream from Geneva, Switzerland. When we come back, we're going to go to the front line, to a coastal town in Sicily, where migrants are pouring in, overwhelming the communities without solutions. We'll also be joined by the head of Human Rights Watch here in New York, Kenneth Roth. This is Democracy Now! We'll be back in a minute.